surprising take that's really worth listening to, because we know about the oil and gas part, but the import part is very interesting, and it's sort of a two edged sword, which requires some thinking about. Anyway, let's continue. Both import and export related revenues are benefiting from the weak ruble. The Finance Ministry originally expected an average exchange rate of 68 rubles per US dollar in 2023. In the latest document published with the 2024 budget, it raises the estimate for 2023 significantly to 85 rubles per US dollar. So you go from roughly 70 to roughly 85. On average, the ruble was 20% weaker than expected. Russia's budget revenue from oil and gas depend primarily on the Ural oil price expressed in ruble. A 20% weaker ruble means a 25% increase in the ruble price of Ural's oil if the dollar price remains the same. The dollar price for Ural oil was 10% lower than the ministry expected, 63 instead of $70. This was mostly because of the EU oil import embargo. So this is the well-known, well-trotted story that there was an oil embargo that, well, not embargo is not the right. Embargo for gas, but not embargo for oil, which started earlier in 2023. That was imposed by the G7, and that has had an impact on the price that Russia has managed to benefit from its exports. So the oil price cap, a separate measure introduced by the G7 that tries to limit the price of Russian oil sold to non-sanctioning countries, made the logistic of reorienting Russian oil trade more difficult, but has had a limited effect at best after the winter. Despite the sanctions, the weak ruble meant that the resulting oil price in the Russian currency was higher than expected, 5,400 instead of 4,800. So again, despite all the West efforts, the fact is that Russia has managed to make more money per unit of oil sold of the year than before. Than expected. So this is a rude awakening. Part of this is funny money, because you can only deflate your currency once, but still that hurts. That really hurts. Sorry. This also compensated for the fact that Russia reduced its oil export volume to stabilize Ural oil price under pressure from sanctions. Russian oil and gas revenues will come in very closely to the original target of 8.9 trillion rubles. So yeah, we're talking about 9 trillion rubles. That's roughly speaking 10. We're talking 9 trillion rubles. So that's, how much is that? That's 90. Yes. No, I'm making a mistake. If 9 trillion rubles, then if it was 10, it would be 900 million. Yeah, it's $19 billion. $90 billion, or $100 billion roughly. To think about it, but this $100 billion is what Russia as a country makes from oil exports, not what the Russian government manages to collect. But still, it's a massive pie. And they can really gouge on it. Meanwhile, the roller coaster of oil revenues is set to continue due to a fall in global oil prices in late 2023 that coincided with Russia's attempt to strengthen its currency with capital controls. The ruble price of Ural oil fell by 25% from its October highs, from 8,000 to from 6 from 8,000 to 6,000 rubles. Sorry. So basically, the price of oil expressed in rubles has fallen by a quarter. Da, da, da. While it is too late to significantly impact the 2023 budget, and Bayanada is asking for yes. Let me just finish the sentence. While it's too late to significantly impact the 2023 budget because mineral extraction tax revenue always trailed the price development by 1 to 2 months, all revenues can be expected to weaken again into next year. So that's a little bit good news, and that's that shows that the Russian efforts to control their currency is having a very, very significant impact on both their economy and their budget. Capital control might seem cheap from the point of view of the government because you just say, oh, well, money cannot leave. But because it does have an impact on the exchange rate, and because the exchange rate has such an impact on the budgets, as a consequence, it does have an impact on the budget, and that means less money. So almost, I mean, there's more reason than one to try to limit the rise of the value of the dollar against the ruble, but it's still a lot of vanities involved there, and the Russian government vanity is costing it absolute billions. If we wanted to express it in Russian tanks, I mean, it's not as if they could produce them, but if we wanted to express it in Russian tanks, we're talking about hundreds of tanks. We're talking about probably a year worth of tank production that is being buried for the sake of maintaining the currency. Yes, Bayanada, please go ahead.
Hey, good evening, Ben. Nice to hear you again, and seeing your space here. Um, we did lately see this news, and I don't know if you like know about this, but like there was like this ship where it was like allegedly an oil transport from Russia to the US, which turned out to be like fertilizer transport. And if I like remember, this fertilizer transport was more about like the last um, like Black Sea shipment grandeur, right? Like, and I also see like exit here in the listeners. Can you expand on this topic? Do you know everything about this? Is there anything you can tell about us?
Absolutely not. I actually don't know anything about it. To be completely honest, what I'm trying to do here is to speed through the articles because I don't really have the time anymore to read much. But if you know more, or if you can point us to something, or maybe Exit will be able to come up at some point and tell us more about it, that would be lovely. If someone has an article to read about that subject, I can definitely do this. Um, but no, I really cannot help you on this. I have literally never heard of the question.
All right. Thank you, Ben. I just did not want to distract you. Please continue. Thank
No
you very
worries.
much.
My throat is actually thanking you. Because as like for those of you who've missed it, it's actually the second time I'm reading the article, and it's a fairly long article where we haven't reached the medium point yet. And the first time round, I did not record anything, so there was nothing. I was speaking to myself to a closed mic. It was great. So anyway, to my throat is a second article. To my brain, it's the first one. Anyway, let's continue. So, Russian imports. Russian imports have been stronger than expected in 2023. Okay, this is really an important part. This is, I wouldn't say it's new or theoretically completely groundbreaking, but he brings the numbers and he brings a lot of mature thinking to the fore. And the next paragraph is probably the most novel and the most interesting in the whole article. So try to pay attention, and I'll try not to screw it up with my poor reading skills. Anyhow, So Russian imports have been stronger than expected in 2023, as budget spending was fueling demand while the economy was running at record capacity utilization. So basically, the Russian consumer is receiving a lot of money, while at the same time, the local factories are mostly producing either nothing because they're closed, or tanks that the local consumer cannot buy. So they're turning to foreign producers to buy stuff, meaning that there's a lot more imports than predicted and than before. Domestic production simply could not keep up, leading to more goods being imported. The original import estimate in the budget law for 2023 was $288 billion. The Russian government updated this estimate to 314 billion US dollars for its latest estimate. So we go from 290 to 315. That's a 20% increase. Additionally, the weaker ruble was a boost for the budget. Expressed in rubles, imports were a whopping 35% higher than expected. They, 35% higher. This is massive. So they buy more, and because their currency is shit, basically, they have to put more of it to buy the same amount of Chinese telephones, and the result is that, well, there's more money leaving the country, which also, by the way, normally has an impact on GDP, because we're not talking about imports in order to build more stuff. We're talking about imports for the regular Ivan Ivanov who wants to buy a telephone, and also for the front lines. These are not productive, and these should just tank the GDP numbers, which makes me think that either the the state of the Russian economy, if the GDP numbers are true, is insane, or if the, or more likely that the GDP numbers are really, really far off. Anyway, let's continue. The fact Russians are paying a higher price for imported goods directly benefits the Russian fiscal situation. Import-related tax revenues were already 1 trillion rubles higher than expected in October 2023. So that's before the last 2 months of the year, including December, where there's Christmas and this sort of things. This windfall will certainly further increase in November and December, meaning import-related tariff revenue will add almost 1% of GDP in unexpected tax revenues to the budget. So all that importing is probably bad for the economy, probably bad for people's health, but fantastic for the state incomes for the moment, because, well, people are buying, and because the VAT matters to them quite a lot, there's more money coming into the state coffers. So that I think that's very good. It's a point very well made. It's also a lot less shiny than the ghost fleet and this sort of things, but it truly, truly matters. So that was the end of the first section, and now the beginning of the second section, with the title "The War is Driving Up Budget Spending." Unless something unexpected happens in December, Russia's federal spending will end up between 32 and 33 trillion rubles for the full year of 2023. In the process of planning the 2024 budget, the Finance Ministry updated its forecast for 2023 revenues from the originally budgeted 29 trillion to 30 trillion. The even more up-to-date website for the electronic budget already shows an expected 32 trillion rubles. So they go from predicting that they're going to spend 29 to actually spending already 32. Hence, the expenditure for 2023 could be over 3.5 trillion rubles, 2% of GDP, higher than originally planned in the budget law. While spending leveled off after the surge in the first half of the year, historical patterns predict a strong December. So that's what I was talking about initially. people tend to spend a lot of money at the end of the year because they want to be able to ask for a bigger budget next year. As of November 20th, almost 22% of Russia's budget expenditure for the year is secret. So again, between a fifth and a quarter of Russia's budget is not uh, not available for researchers. Over two-thirds of this secret spending traditionally belongs to the defense budget. Nowadays, an even higher share is related to the war, but partly falls in other categories. Secret spending was particularly high in the first month of the year, contributing 33% to total spending in the first quarter. Sorry about the mouse noise, I'm going to be careful about this. Most civilian spending categories are predictable. They stay within the original budget projections and increase gradually over the course of the year. This is true for most types of social spending, such as social policy, healthcare, and education. While expected spending on security was reduced over the course of 2022 from 3.6 to 3.2 trillion rubles, and so far seems to remain below even this lower figure, there are two other categories that have shown clear increases related to Russia's war, housing, and transfer. Okay, this is worth stopping for a quarter of a second. Um, Security, so the police, which is supposedly this thing where Russia is spending the most money to maintain the regime, strengthen the regime, pay off the FSB, friends of Putin, is actually getting less money, spending less money than expected, than that initially envisaged or asked for. That's quite an interesting data point, because if you assume that they were ready to spend it and they were told, actually guys, you cannot spend it, there's a problem. Yeah, Bayana, please go ahead.
Yeah, Ben, like if you see the relation of Russia, like spending more on the war economy, but like almost the same or less amount on like the internal security, and especially growing recent concerns in the internal Russian security um, through like protests of like groups in Russia, right? Like, um, is are there concerns about Russia and their internal security? Is there something founded about it, or is this not really like? Can't we really see this like in the defense spending? In your opinion?
Well, yeah, I don't know. This is typical the sort of question that would be wonderful to ask Yanis. Um, One thing that what's the name of this guy? The spectator guy. Anyway, this in Moscow Shadows. Okay, that guy. What he's been repeating again and again is the fact that the Rosguardia is gradually becoming more militarized. But Rosguardia actually depends on the securities budget. So normally that budget should be going to buying tanks for those very disposable bodies that cannot at the moment be sent to the mid grinder because they're trying to fight demonstrators, not to fight, Ukrainians with ATGMs. And supposedly they were going to start building their own Panzer division, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And if I was a betting man, I would say that the money that was initially meant to train those guys and turn those guys into an actual proper fighting force, that money has been diverted back to the army because the army needed it more now than what they could do. So it's both good news and bad news. That means that they're struggling, that they have to make hard choices, um, and all the military people here, they keep telling us that you don't win by scoring points. You win by forcing the enemy to make bad choices. So it forces them to make a bad choice. On the other hand, it also shows that they've got quite a lot of quite a lot of manpower to fall on. like Rosgaja are a lot of people, and some of them are very well trained. They're roughly speaking military police, so they could do quite a lot of damage if they were brought up to speed. But it's pure speculation. I don't know. I just thought that was a very interesting data point.
Okay, how would you like? In which kind of relationship would like put manpower? I mean, you can spend a lot of
Ben,
money
I'm
in
sorry.
manpower, and
I couldn't hear you. I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat this? You must
oh,
be
so sorry,
deep,
Ben.
deep in the
Yeah,
sauna, like
I'm,
half naked
I'm,
in the snow or something.
no, like I'm fucking deep into Ukrainian Oblast, so possibly the connection is not that well. Um, can, can you define like what kind of percentage like is going into manpower and what kind of the point point of the percentage is like actually going like in planning and keeping these kind of yeah relationships on, right? Like is it possible for Russia to like keep this on, or are they just like spending billions and billions and billions on like manpower, just like
I'm not sure. Okay, you broke off again. I'm not sure I can really answer again. This is we're always on the verge of criminal of trying to stare into the eyes of the Kremlin, because it's it's difficult to understand. It's difficult to have hard data and anything smart to say about this. But I think we can um, you know cherish those few points and then make our own minds about it, but stay flexible. Somebody was kind enough to remind me that I had not put the article in the nest. It is done now. It only took me an hour to do it, so live and learn. Okay, I'm gonna try to speed through because we've passed the half time. We've passed the half of the article. So let's try to go there. The next two paragraphs are quite interesting about housing and transfer, um, and we're going to be speaking about Surovikin. So housing includes the construction and maintenance of public buildings. In 2020, spending in this category was 372 billion rubles. In 2023, it is expected to be 847. So you go from a bit less than 400 billion to quite a lot more than 800 billion. So more than 100% increase. A strong increase when compared to the already high 600 billion in the original budget for this year. So not only they spent more, but they spent a lot more than they expected to spend. A closer look at spending subcategories is sorry, a closer look at spending subcategories revealed that sudden increase in the related spending on frontal region and annexed territories. The situation in transfer is similar. This category mostly consists of subsidies to regional budget, which usually follows strict and predictable formulas. So basically, they're spending a lot in Belgorod, um, as well as Donetsk. Some of it goes to those silly attempts to rebuild the very same cities that they've leveled, and assume that some of it goes into the Surovikin line. At the end of the day, they've built tons and tons and tons over well over 1,000 kilometers of front line. This cannot come cheap. This is a lot of money. Unfortunately, this is not so much money that they cannot do it again. But this is enormous amount of money. We don't truly realize. it's actually quite interesting. Look, they're saying that it's something to the order of magnitude of 400 billion rubles. That's 5 billion US dollars. That's a 5 billion US dollars worth of defense probably that has been raised there, and that's not even including labor, which is either made by military personnel, which is paid through another mean, or through I'm sure they're using slave labor at some point or another. So there's the Surovikin line is massive, and here you're able to touch it from with a finger, quite how big this was. 5 billion invested in this is quite a lot, and if you just think about how much the West has given Ukraine, for instance, to train and arm them. The 47 Brigade, when it attacked, it probably did not have more than $100 million dollars worth of gizmos with them, and they went with 100 million gizmos against a segment of the line that probably cost $1 billion. So the 1-to-3 ratio in manpower, I don't know whether it was respected or not, but the 1-to-3 ratio in spending power was probably not respected. This is very, very much numbers on the fly, right? I'm trying to calculate as I speak, but this is the sort of things we should remember when it comes to these sort of things. Ukraine, at the end of the day, is fighting a war cheap against an adversary that is splashing out. Yes, Bayonada. We have lost Bayonada. Okay, give me a buzz when you're ready. So this year there was a sudden increase. So we're talking about transfers. This year there was a sudden increase from 1,200 billion to 1,500 billion rubles. Again, a closer look reveals that this increase is related to construction activities close to the front line. The trillion ruble question, quite literally, in the 2023 budget is if secret spending will skyrocket again in the last days of the year, similar to the end of 2022. The finance ministry claimed in the early 2023 that the high spending in the first month of the year will avoid an extreme December like 2022. But given the unpredictable nature of war spending, the finance ministry may find it hard to predict spending itself. Depending on the final days of the year, secret spending will most likely range somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 trillion rubles, clearly exceeding last year's level of 6 trillion rubles. That's quite an interesting point he's making. And again, that's why I love Janis. No, sorry, Yanis, Janis. Um, it's because he's used to these sort of things, and he knows where the where the problem is going to be, where it's likely to be, and what he's telling us right now is news for December are going to be very interesting. Until now, the past few months, there was a lot of bad news from the budget point of view for the Russians, but these were mostly expectations, planning, this sort of things, and very often those are ministries trying to look as poor as possible in order not to be cut too hard when comes budget decisions. In this case, what it's saying is that December might be the making or breaking of the Russian budgetary health. If they have managed to handle it correctly, and they might, we're not going to have any news. If by Christmas time, or at the very least by King's Day, we don't have any news about them having some problems, this is bad. But on the other hand, if we hear again and again that they've overspent, that they're short on cash, etc., etc., this will show that they're in for a hell of a ride for December, and that they're facing a lot more problem than they're trying to reveal. So yeah, something to look forward for the months to come. Based on historical patterns, it is possible to estimate the amount of secret spending that is connected to defense spending in two different ways. Okay, this is very weird. I'm not going to read those those two paragraphs, because they're too strange. I'm sorry. Let's move on to the next section. He's talking about how we calculate the secret spending. Reading it out loud just hurts my head. How do I allow people in? Yes, add a speaker. Third section, Russia's budget weakened in 2023. On paper, the deficit in last year's budget was 2.1%, while this year's deficit is predicted to come at 1.8% in the explanatory note attached to the new budget law. Even if the actual deficit is closer to 1%, as Putin suggested, the underlying trend is still negative. The reason is that some of 2023 spending was already built into the 2022 budget. 2022 was an historically profitable year for Russia, as Moscow benefited from high energy prices, which in turn were boosted by Russia's own aggression. Economics is often not fair. Russia used a comfortable budget situation to prepare. In 2022, the budget allowed small and medium-sized companies to defer their social security contribution, meaning less revenue for the state in 2022 and more in 2023 and 2024. In addition, the Finance Ministry made a prepayment for the Social Fund of Russia, pension and social transfers, in December 2022, effectively transferring 1% of GDP from the 2022 windfall to 2023. Again, here we see quite how effective the Russian bureaucrats are. I don't want to focus on the good news that Janice just landed on us, but they're good at what they're doing. I don't think in the West, our bureaucrats and our economists, who are trained for good times mostly, would be ready to do this sort of thing, or would be quite as willing to do this sort of things. And most certainly, their political leaders, masters, would not be very happy about this. But in the case of Russia, they're so used to crisis, because they've been in permanent state of crisis since 2008, 2009. Since then, they're constant crisis. So they have some habits. They know how to handle the crisis, and we're still very much in the same old for them. Hopefully, very soon we'll get into new territory, and life will throw at them some curveballs that they've never faced before. But for the moment, that's what it is. That being said, the good news is, well, they're cheating. Of course, they're cheating. In this case, it's almost fair cheating, but it's still cheating. They do appear better than they should. This is why the Finance Ministry itself estimates the quote-unquote true deficit, without prepayment and other distorting factors, for 2022 at 0.7% of GDP, and the true deficit for 2023 at 2.7%. These numbers are a better representation of the Russian government's ability to collect taxes and the spending requirement of the war, and show that the situation clearly worsened in 2023. So we went from a bit more than 0.5% of GDP of true deficit to very nearly 3%. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but basically it's times 6. Yeah, it started from low, so still not great, but it's times 6. And that's another thing. It's very weird for us in the West to see 2.7% of GDP being a problem for a country when it comes to deficit, but they don't have access to our funding. They don't have access to our system, and so for them, deficit is not really something they can afford quite as easily as we can. So this is much better news than the relatively small number would let us assume. Moving on. So the conclusion, the moment of truth in 2024. The wider economy, In the wider economy, 2023 was a year marked by dynamic growth, driven primarily by Russia's military industry. GDP growth in 2023 will most likely exceed 3%. In contrast, 2024 could be, quote unquote, the year of truth for Russia's economy in several ways. The finance ministry hopes for significantly higher tax revenues, nearly 20% of GDP in 2024, up from 17% of GDP in 2023, to further ramp up the war financing. More tax revenues would mean a partial reversal of the fiscal stimulus that boosted the economy over the last couple of years. In combination with a key interest rate of 15% and labor scarcity, businesses not directly producing for the war will face major headwinds. This means that 2024 could also be the year when the price of the war will finally be felt more acutely by average Russians. Consumer prices have already increased by over 0.8% per month in September and October 2023, which is equivalent to a 10% annual rate. Until the presidential election in March 2024, the government will certainly keep the ruble stable with the newly reintroduced capital control and keep budget spending high. However, propping up the ruble today only leads to more downside pressure after the support measure ends, and extra spending before the election means less spending afterwards. Furthermore, if the central bank is serious about bringing inflation down, it might have to drive Russia's economy into a recession to achieve that goal. While the finance ministry built its budget for 2024 around around the expectation of 2.3% of GDP growth next year, recent forecasts have already become much more pessimistic, and even a recession seems possible. It is commonplace to end any outlook for Russia's economy with a disclaimer about oil price. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has become much more vulnerable to oil price swings. If prices fall, the government would have to let the ruble devalue drastically, leading to high inflation and quickly falling real income. Defending the ruble would become very difficult, even if the central bank wanted to do it, because Western sanctions limited the available currency reserves. The last time Russia went through such a period was in 2014-2016. In the following years, Russia consolidated its budget by cutting expenditure, including for the military, and raising the retirement age, including for the military. In a time of ever-increasing war spending, any fiscal consolidation would be even more painful for the population. The author thanks Bloomberg's Alex Izakov for providing electronic budget data used in this analysis. All right, Bayonada, save me. Let me breathe a little bit.
Yep, and this sounds really interesting, but what will be the actual impacts for the normal Russian citizens, right? We are talking about spending on people who have much money, who gain much money, and what is the actual experience for the Russian population in Russia when they are have increased gains of the economy?
Actually, it doesn't really matter. I mean, unless you care about them directly, which right now I don't. If I don't think the point is for them to be, because I assume under your question there's the other question, which is, are they going to see that they cannot feed their children as properly as they hope to, that they cannot buy the sort of things they want to, and thus they will go to the street and rebel? I'm not holding my breath, although right now I'm short of breath, but I'm not holding my breath for this sort of things. I don't think it will happen. I don't want to plan for it to happen. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, well, I wasn't planning for it happening anyway. So I don't think that sort of things will have an impact. Uh, then you've got the usual thing: lower life expectancy, higher child mortality rate, this sort of things. This is nasty. This is British, but this is what you get for having a government that spends money in building fucking fortification in the middle of a foreign country, instead of building roads in yours. So yeah, I don't know how to answer your question properly. I just want to say I'm no way I'm contesting the premises of your question.
Yeah, gotcha. It's hard to relate to the Russian economy and to the people itself. But it mostly hits like the Russian economy related to the people is not that much, right?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I'm trying to post the next article, so I was a bit distracted. I'm really apologize. What were you saying?
Are these kind of measures like really hitting the local economy in Russia, or is it like just hitting oligarchs and Russian,
Oh no,
people itself?
it is definitely hitting the local population. I mean, but ultimately there's the thing, which is that if you work in a factory that is closing because there's no demand anymore and there's no supply, and most of the people who work there are either on the front line or working in another factory, if that factory closes, you lose a lot. There's people that are never going to find labor again, employment again. There are people. Who are going to basically have to burn their house and buy a new one. There's a lot of lost energy in this sort of things. So even in the best case scenario, they're going to lose a lot. Only a country which is already in massive how do you call this? Only a country which is already in a massive crisis might benefit from this sort of reallocation of resources.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Can you expand on this?
Yeah, no, well, not really. I can't because I don't have the numbers, and I don't want to say something stupid. I think what's interesting with the point of view of the likes of Alex or Yanis is the fact that they look at the one consumer that truly matters in Russia, and that one consumer is the Kremlin. Uh, the rest is, I don't want to say it's unimportant, because of course it's not, but at the same time, um, it is the sort of things that does not have a direct impact. Um, I'm always thinking that what we're doing is that we're trying to talk to the people in the trench lines, and we're trying to talk to the people in front of the voting booth, and trying to tell them that the Russians are soon gonna be fed up. Um, it would be lying to them. Telling them that Russia might not have enough money to build the next factory, to build tanks. They may not have enough money to source the next batch of chips that will go into their missiles. That is something which is much more likely. So I think we should focus on this, rather than um, the perfectly normal and healthy uh, um, reflex, which is to look at people. Because in a normal democracy, in a normal country, we would look at people because what people think matters. In the case of Russia, it does matter, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. And that balance is so difficult to strike. We might spend so much time and effort to strike that balance that, yeah, I don't think we're gonna have a very good return on our investment. Do you want to move on to the next article?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But like, would you like to extend on the general outlook for Russia in the next 10 to 20 years and the Russian economy going on? Is it possible for Russia going on this level? Are they able to like subdue Russian people and say like, hey, we accept this level of like losing the standard of living, or is Russia not able to lose the standard of living at all?
Uh, I don't know. I think a very good metric is probable losses. Recently, I was talking with a French guy who's I don't think he's an historian. I just think he's an history buff, but he knows his stuff very well. And he was telling me that every day, on average, if you exclude the bloodbaths at the beginning and the end on the Western Front of the First World War, France and Germany both were losing 3,000 men every day. I'm not talking about losses in general. I'm talking about dead people. 3,000 dead every day. Um, Russia is losing about 5% of this, 10% on bad days for them. And they have a population which is, I mean, yeah, it's not everything is comparable, but their population is, depending on how you're counting, between twice and three times higher than what was the French population in 1914. So, assuming that the investment is proportional, and in a way it is, because again, France was spending something like 25% of its GDP to fight the war, sometimes close to 30, and nowadays Russia is spending maybe 7% of its GDP to fight the war. So yeah, they have a lot of resources left. The only question is, are they willing to make the decisions and the political choices that will allow them to tap into those dormant resources? But they have the resources. Like, don't doubt for a second that they have the resources. They have them. They're not fighting NATO. They're fighting. I'm sorry to say this to our Ukrainian friends, but they're fighting what is almost the poorest nation in Europe. They can do it for a long, long time. If nothing changes, if the rate of losses doesn't change for them drastically, they can do it for a very, very long time. The only good thing is that the Ukrainians can probably do it for even longer.
So we are not talking about like how the Ukrainians can like take these losses and like how the Russians can take these losses. But if we relate this to the Ukrainians in the European Union and like the European Union um, supporting Russia, is there any kind of measure Russia is be able to fight the whole European Union and the whole economy of the European Union in itself? Do they have perspectives, or is Russia not able to fight the whole European Union at all in a whole matter?
Again, it all depends. It depends a lot more on political and psychological factors than on hard numbers. Um, Again, if you think about the size of the Vietnamese economy compared to the size of the American economy back in 1968, I mean, this is ridiculous. We're talking about people who were on the brink of starvation and had been on the brink of starvation for 40 years or 25 years. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, the largest power the world had ever seen.
But personally, would you put the Ukrainian economy into a section where you say like the Ukrainian people are like going to starve or like having really problems against Russia, or is it like a level of the Ukrainians just giving up their kind of yeah kind of good levels of living, right? Like
Yeah,
what
there was a massive shock, that is certain. But nowadays, the Ukrainian economy as such doesn't exist anymore, in the sense that such a large portion of the Ukrainian budget is paid for from outside, um, that there's been a complete decoupling between the performance of the Ukrainian economy on the one hand and the Ukrainian budget on the other. I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course, but as a result, unless the Russians manage to destroy the European economy, which is not entirely impossible, but is tall order, unless they manage to do this, money will never stop flowing and as long as there's no stupid political decision. But there is no reason to believe that money will stop flowing towards Ukraine. My country, as problems, as issues, but we're investing something like, let me see, less than 8% of our military budget goes into supporting Ukraine one way or another. Not only military, all aid to Ukraine is less than 8% of France's military budget. We can do that for a long time. And that's the issue. We can do that for a long time. And we should have no doubt that we can do this for a long time. Do we want to do this for a long time? Probably not. And on the one hand, some people, even if it's only a few billions here and a few billions there, some people would rather build schools, somehow. And that's the first point. And the second point, those of us who would like for more than a few billions here and a few billions there to be invested in Ukrainian victory, hopefully at some point somebody is going to wake up and make that happen. So I don't know. You're asking excellent questions, but it's so speculative, and I'm really not equipped to ask them. I really would love to move on to the next article, because it's quite fun, and it's a bit of it stays on the subject of Russia. You okay with this, Bayana?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I'm just wanted to find out like how much is the impact of the actual European Union on the budget of Ukraine? Like how much could what kind of effect the European Union really would have on Ukraine if they really wanted, right?
40 billion euros.
Okay, 40 billion euros every year.
So yeah, this is both massive and not much. So yeah, we can do this. We can absolutely do this. Anyway, so I've posted the next. Oh, all right. There's a little doggy saying hello. All right. So I've posted the next article. It's from the FT. It was written by Courtney Weaver in Berlin, Max Seddon in Riga, and Adrian Klaza in Paris. Ooh, there's going to be some Paris aspect. Of course, it's by Danone. So you may know, maybe, that Danone is a French yogurt brand. Initially started in Barcelona, by Jewish Greek refugees. Don't ask me, I know so much about Danone. Jewish Greek refugee who started a Greek company and managed to convince the Catalan that eating yogurt was a good idea. He then moved his company to Paris, somehow survived World War II, and became the main name in dairy product in France. So I'm sure they're going to refer to this in the article itself, but the main thing that happened is that Danone, as many of the French, and not only French, Western food companies, did not move away from Russia, saying we owe it to our clientele not to interrupt their food intake. And as a result, and since we're not war related in any way, we would like to continue. So that's how the likes of Auchan and Bonduelle are still in Russia. Hopefully, at some point, Bonduelle will get the missile they deserve. They're in Belgorod, but you know, somehow Ukrainians decided to be the good guys, and we decided to support the good guys. So we're not destroying food processing factories. But still, sometimes some people are so obnoxious they go beyond the rules and regulations of war. So Danone stayed in Russia and was appropriated and then given to Kadyrov's cousin in an absolute ridiculous and hilarious move. So here we are. So it's been a few months, and I think the article is a look at how things are going. So the title of the article is Danone's Chechen Takeover Inside a Russian Expropriation. Business handed to Warlord's nephew has retained much of the French Darius Group previous management. Oh, God. I'm sure it's going to be FSB management again. What was it? Yeah, it was Bonduelle was actually led by a former FSB alumni. By an FSB alumni, which again shows the strong relationship between foreign investment, Russian industry, and the Slovaki understood in a wider in a wider way. Like, it's not Mr. Kadyrov that is ruling Danone; it's his cousin, and it's not Mr. FSB that is ruling Bonduelle; it's his former aide or God knows whom. Anyway, so let's begin with the article from the FT. When a group of Chechens with link to their region's strongman leader, Razman Kadyrov, showed up this summer to seize control of Danone's operation in Russia, the company began receiving frightened calls from staff in the country. The French dairy group had been close to finalizing a Rothschild-brokered deal to leave Russia when the Kremlin declared its local operation, along with those of Danish brewer Carlsberg, had been placed under, quote, temporary external management. But while the designation sounded the death knell for Clark's role in Russia's business, two of whose top foreign executives now sit in prison, what had followed for Danone had been more of a bizarre stasis. Much of life at its Russian dairy operation continued as before, with the Chechens largely running the expropriated factories in name only, and previous leadership still involved in much of the day-to-day management. Danone's new Chechen bosses are, quote, running it basically as an MBA cases, fairly professional and without raising too many flags, pulling the guns out and stuff like that, end quote. According to one person close to Russia's government subcommittee on Western assets. Quote, it is extremely amicable, the person said. Danone are not telling the world they have been mistreated. They don't sound like they're offended. Oh, yeah. Behind the scenes, the company is still scrambling to complete the formal sale of its Russian business. According to people familiar with the talks, believing it can still get some money if properly matched with the right Kremlin-approved buyers. Danone declined to comment. Gosh, those people are ghouls. Russia accounted for about 5% of the group's 27 billion euros in annual revenue in 2022, making the French company among the most exposed to European consumer groups to the war. The yogurt makers, Russia's biggest dairy business, first entered the market 3 decades ago after the fall of the Soviet Union. It's exactly the same as Bonduelle. As other Western companies pulled out after Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine last year, Danone initially said it would remain in Russia, while halting investment, arguing it had the responsibility to its 7,000 local employees and the dairy farmers who supplied its 13 factory sites. Quote, "It is very easy to get drawn into black and white thinking and demagogic position, but in the end, our reputation is about our behavior," said executive Antoine Saint-Affrique told the Financial Times at the time. So, proper accent is called for. "We have a responsibility to the people we feed, the farmers who provide us with milk, and the tens of thousands of people who depend on us." 8 months into the conflict, the company changed tack, saying it would leave Russia in a transaction that could lead to a write-up up to 1 billion euros. Danone and Carlsberg differing approaches to seizure provide a striking illustration of the different fates meeting some of Russia's biggest foreign investors as they attempt to execute plan to leave the market. Yeah, buy another. What's up?
Ben, can you extend on like which kind of dairy farmers are this? And in which countries are they active? Are they active like in Europe or like where are these dairy farmers from?
Oh, for all intended purposes, I think 95% of everything is Russian. First of all, as you know, milk doesn't travel very well. It's relatively cheap, so you don't carry water from one part of the continent to the other. And secondly, especially after 2014, with the whole sanction thing, it became a lot more interesting for what do you call it? Retailers? No, not retailers. How do they call them again? For food producing groups to consumer groups. Sorry, for consumer
Okay,
groups to produce locally.
okay, they're producing it locally, right? Like it's Russian farmers, Russian local dairy farmers, which like produce for Danone uh, more than most likely in Russia or Russian positive countries and not in the European Union, but like they are like producing locally themselves, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that even fruits and stuff they mostly come from Russia, with famously the few things they cannot produce coming from Turkey. So it's they're in terms of the actual products, they're fairly insulated from the West.
Дякую, Ben. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm really sorry. There's quite a few people telling me that they cannot hear me properly. For those of you who are having problem, I think Erland has managed to route the conversation to YouTube. Maybe it's better. Hopefully, that will do it. FT. Where was I? A differing approach. Yeah. So difference between Danone and Carlsberg. The announcement of the expropriation and the subsequent appointment of external managers came as a shock to the two companies and other Russian government officials who had been negotiating their exit. Russia last month arrested two former Carlsberg executives, including the country's former Russia CEO, on accusation of fraud. Carlsberg had condemned the move, alleging that the Russian government had resorted to, quote, targeting innocent employees, end quote, as part of its broader attempt to seize the company's business. Quote, "The Russian state can be quite unpredictable," said Alexandra Prokopenko, a non-resident fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia. She's great. If you can follow her, she's great. Neither Danone nor Carlsberg has any clear view about the further steps of the Russian government, she added. And even the Russian government does not have any clue of what they will make next. Yeah, that's no wonder. Ahead of Danone's own takeover, the French company had narrowed its list down to 3 potential buyers, hoping to retain a 25% stake in the subsidiary with the option to buy back its majority stake in the future, according to 2 people with knowledge of the situation. But since the appointment of external managers, the French group had issued only measured statement about the takeover, saying it was, quote, "preparing to take all measures to protect its right as shareholder," but stopping short of accusing Russia of expropriation. Although Kadyrov's 33-year-old nephew, Yakub Zagriev, is listed on Russia's corporate registry as general director of the renamed Life and Nutrition, Dutch Danone veteran Charlie Capetti unofficially fulfills many of the roles duty according to people with direct knowledge of the matter. Are you joking? It's a EU citizen who's running this company from Russia? That sucks. So apparently we're doing fine on YouTube. Good. For now, Danone's Russia pre-seizure executive committee remains in place, working to protect assets and staff while localizing all operation, including IT system and brand, in preparation for prospective sale, according to people familiar with the matter. The new external manager have yet to fire anyone from the previous management structure. Capetti and other executives at the group, both foreign and Russian, remain in regular contact with Danone's head office in Paris. The people said to ensure the business continues to run smoothly. Oh my god, they're going to have to hire a bunch of IT guys. Below the surface and below the psychological and political impact of those decisions, that's a quote, and this announcement, things are actually continuing quite normally, said one person close to Danone's Russia's business, noting that the new external manager of the company had no interest in, quote, rocking the boat and potentially depreciating the asset. People close to the company said Zakriev, who was placed under sanction by the US in November, had made several appearances at the Danone Russia premises, but was not there often initially. Instead, he installed subordinates to oversee the operation. Yet, those people did not have very deep business knowledge, according to people with knowledge of the business. On its new board sits 3 other Kadyrov acolytes: Chechnya former Deputy Agriculture Minister Ruslan Ali Sultanov, and 2 young Kazan-based businessmen Yakov Kashanyan and Mitimer Mingazov, who have posed in photograph with the Chechen warlord or members of his regime. The new team of external managers at first appear afraid of messing up the underlying business, according to people with knowledge of the Danone Russia operation. Any slowdown of the company's production could hurt Russian dairy farmers and retailers. Natalia Shapova, chair of the KSE Institute of the Kiev School of Economics, said the complexities of yogurt making gave Danone more leverage over their new bosses. The production process requires the management of complicated supply chains for the colors, flavor, ferments, and bioplastic required. Withdrawing their unique ingredients from the production would make the whole difference to this business. Yeah, they have the power and they don't want to use it. That reminds me of something. Since the arrival of the new managers, Danone has been approached by new parties looking to buy the company, according to people with knowledge of the talks. The company is continuing to work with Rothschild, which also managed the earlier aborted sales process. However, it continues to encounter differing views within the Russian government about the future of its assets, according to people on both sides of the discussion. There have been signs in recent weeks that the new management is ready to exert more control, including on decisions regarding products and marketing, said one person with knowledge of Dannon's Russia operation. Oh, please, let the Chechens rule the yogurt company. That's going to be a lot of fun. Talk about a business case. That's going to be in the Harvard Business Reviews very, very, very soon. It's becoming a real takeover, said someone. We're taking control little by little. Sorry, wrong accent. Let me do it again. It's becoming a real takeover. We're taking control little by little. They're not just guys who came to tour the property, said the person. Shapoval said Dannon's slowness to exit Russia had helped land it in its predicament with the Chechens. Yeah. By the way, how cool is it that the Kiev School of Economics is now becoming basically the main knowledge center for about Russia in Europe and potentially in the world. Like, you can barely write a single article without referring them. I think that's super cool. Soon Russia will be included in Ukrainska Mir. Let's continue. So, quote, Russia was saying directly that they would take control over the assets of the international businesses, and they violated rights of investors well before they came to expropriate the asset. But Dannon didn't go to Dannon didn't go to investment arbitrage or make sufficient effort to exit, she said. It was clear from the very beginning that Russia would take them hostage, and Russia would try to leverage foreign governments with these hostages, which is exactly why there has been such a push for exit. She had it. There's no H in headed. Thank you. And that's it. So yeah, quite interesting. Very interesting as well that company, which, like every food company, basically has very specific and difficult supply chain and knowledge systems, is still run by Europeans currently in Russia. That's quite depressing. We're still helping them, considering the premium that labor is at in Russia, considering that it is probably their number one bottleneck. The fact that any European in any capacity is still allowed to be in Russia and work in Russia is a shame. It's really, really a shame, and I'm not surprised, but I'm upset. You don't care whether I'm upset or not, but I am still upset. All right, so it is 1:00 for me. I have a subscription to your bloody newspaper. So I wanted to read another article. I have an account. I don't remember. Sign in. Yes. Continue. No. God damn it. Finally. Thank you. It's working? Yeah, it is working. No, I forgotten about me. I'm feeling cheap. Okay, there's a very long but potentially very good article on Bloomberg, so I will read it as fast as I can. Let me put it on the what's the name of that? Ireland, you came to save me. No, Ireland did not come to save me. So, how Russia punched billion. Hopefully, it's gonna no a billion. No. Found it, and it is going to no. There. All right, so it is in the nest. It's a Bloomberg article by Alaric Nightingale, Julian Lee, who's awesome, and Alex Longley. It is titled How Russia Punched an 11 billion hole in the West's oil sanction. That will do it, like sort of a trifecta on Russia. Next time, if there's a next time, we'll look at other subjects, not to get our head too far into Russia's ass. So, how Russia punched an 11 billion hole in the West oil sanction. Moscow's monthly income from oil export is greater now than before the invasion of Ukraine. Oh my. So let me read this again for it to sink. Moscow's monthly income from oil export is greater now than before the invasion of Ukraine. Oh my. Highlighting the failure of measures to curb its war chest. Yeah, that. There's another request? No. Oh, somebody's becoming buggy. Anyway, the failure of Western sanctions on Russian oil exports can be seen as a short boat ride from the Greek coastal town of Hiteio, where two oil tankers with rusty hulls and a combined age of 57 years sit just meters apart from one another. The identity of the ship's owner and insurer are elusive. They sail under the only flag in the world deemed by the authorities to be, quote, very high risk, and the final destination of the profit from trading their Russian fuel is a mystery. Even their movements are suspicious. Digital tracking system showed the 26-year-old Turba floating over 4 miles away as the 900-foot Simba emptied its fuel cargo into the smaller vessel in full view of a Bloomberg documentary team. On the same day as the ship, oh my God, Bloomberg! I think they made a documentary about the Ghost Fleet, and I think it looks great. I've seen the trailer. I think it was a trailer, and that could be quite interesting. But that's beside the point. On the same day as this ship-to-ship transfer took place in September, more than a dozen similar vessels, part of the vast Shadow Fleet, floated nearby doing the same thing or getting ready to. So, at a given point, 12, 14, 14 tankers doing this sort of things. Designed to reduce funding for the Kremlin's military assault on Ukraine, the sanction deal agreed a year ago this week included a $60 per barrel price cap for seaborne Russian oil, $24 below the average market price over the last 12 months. Instead, it has fostered a lucrative business for scores of difficult-to-trace traders and shipping companies. As much as 11 billion a year of petrodollars are evaporating between when the oil leaves Russia to when it reaches buyers, according to trade data compiled by Bloomberg. So, it's a 24 minutes bonanza called Russia's Shadow Fleet. It's the link, the documentary. The link is in the article that I have in turn linked in the nest. The price cap was structured to prevent companies in group of seven nations from providing Russia with services like shipping and insurance when the oil was being sold for more than $60. At the same time, the European barred almost all oil imports from Russia, which up to that point had been the bloc's main supplier, forcing Moscow into the arms of two dominant customers, China and India. The sanction plan was conceived as a way to constrain Russia's oil revenue without causing a spike in global energy prices. A byproduct has been the reshaping of the financial architecture of the oil and maritime trade in a way that some experts say might be hard to reverse at the end of the conflict, or after the eventual lifting of the existing sanction regime. It has increased fears of an environmental catastrophe and left the door open to these unseen oil funds flowing back into the Kremlin to finance the Ukraine conflict. The shadow fleet, an alternative to Western maritime insurance, are not new. Iran has used them for years. That's a quote, by the way. Now that a massive producer like Russia is using them, they have become more mainstream, said Edith Fishman, who's awesome, a senior research scholar at Columbia University's Center of Global Energy Policy. And that's me adding former economist at OFAC, leader at OFAC, something important at OFAC, who has helped shape previous US sanctions on Iran and Russia and advocate for the use of secondary sanctions to give the existing measures teeth. Absent concerted action to make it costlier to use this substandard alternative to Western services, they will grow and become a structural feature of the world oil trade. Yeah. Despite tentative signs that the West is reacting to try and frustrate Russia's workaround, the authorities in Greece argue they are powerless to prevent these clandestine shipping activities taking place just off the nation's coast. They happen in international waters that begin 6 miles from the shorelines in the Laconian Gulf. The stretch of water where the Turba and the Simba came together. Spain, another EU member state, was able to stamp out similar activities earlier this year, leaving Greece, the world's single largest oil tanker owning nation, as a crucial outlier. Operating under the price cap, Greek-owned vessels handled more of Moscow oil this year than rival from any other individual country except Russia itself. The Greek owners were able to stay in the trade without breaking EU rules after the country's diplomats successfully lobbied other member states to water down measures that would have otherwise restricted the shippers' ability to trade with Russia. Greek vessels carried 20% of all Russia's oil shipments so far in 2023, and almost a third of its exports of the flagship grade Ural crudes, according to shipping data. How long that will continue is uncertain. The International Maritime Organization, the watchdog that oversees shipping, said on Wednesday that the illegal activities of the shadow fleet of oil tankers present, quote, a grave concern for environmental safety and called for a global clampdown. It asked member states to promote action to prevent illegal operation in the maritime sector by the shadow fleet. Without mentioning Russia by name, the IMO, so that's the International Maritime Organization, noted that the ships pose, quote, a real and high risk of incidents, particularly when engaging in ship-to-ship transfers. The importance of the shadow fleet to Moscow is evident. It moved about 45% of Russia's oil this year. The shadow fleet is becoming entrenched, said Lars Barstad, Chief Executive Officer of the management arm of Frontline Limited, owner of the world's largest supertankers, and it will continue as long as the regulators are unable to act against it. Bad news galore. The ship owner, at least everyone's guilty. It's not as if somebody was a shining beacon and the rest were like, oh, but look, those people are doing so great. Everyone is in it, and if you include the Ukrainians, everyone is behaving like an ass. Let's continue. The ship owners and traders involved have helped Russia navigate its way around a sanction package that was initially advertised as an aggressive move that for the first time was to impose a price cap on a major internationally traded commodity. Yet, Russia's revenue from its main tax-generating sources of petrodollar almost doubled between April and October. Russia's net oil revenue of $11 billion in October accounted for 31% of the nation's overall net budget revenue for the month, according to Bloomberg's calculations that are built around Russia's finance ministry data, but smooth out profit-based tax revenue, blah, blah, blah. That was the highest since May 2022 and exceeded any single month in the year before the invasion of Ukraine, which initially caused huge volatility to the nation's exports. Domestic and Channel Fleet owner collectively moved over 70% of Russian oil cargoes in the first 9 months of 2023, allowing Moscow to maintain control over its export and progressively increase prices. Official Indian custom data shows that the price paid for Russian oil averaged $72 a barrel this year by the time it reached the Asian country. That is $12 higher than the price declared at the point of export in Russia, according to data compiled by the KSC Institute, part of Kyiv School of Economics. Them again, and supporter of tough sanction against Moscow. Argus Media data used to inform G7 policy show a similar gap since March, given that Russia has exported close to 3.5 million barrels of oil a day this year. It means that about $11 billion is going into what might be called a delivery spread. Some of that will represent legitimate shipping cost, but almost all of it goes through anonymous traders and unknown shipping companies. Prior to the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the bulk of Russian oil was handled by a tiny clique of super powerful merchants working out of locations like London and Geneva. Vitol Group, Glencore, and Trafigura Group were the dominant forces. Between them, they moved roughly 40% of the nation Ural crude. Sorry, I'll get it at some point. In 2021, this trio of companies publicly exited the trade in Russian crude oil not long after the invasion, and as the prospect of sanction became reality. They have been replaced by an army of smaller and more difficult to trace organizations with unclear affiliation and headquarters from Hong Kong to Dubai. Excluding Russia Lukoil, PJSC, China National Petroleum Corp, and Indian Oil Corp, the top 5 buyers of Russia oil today were all unknown entities when the assault on Ukraine began. One was incorporating only after the invasion, according to KSC Institute data and company filing. Some, including the seemingly Harry Potter inspired Bellatrix Energy and Nord Axis Limited, are closely associated with individual Russian producers. In the first 9 months of 2023, Bellatrix, for instance, handled about 20% of shipments from Surguneftegas, the nation's third largest exporter of the period, according to the KSC Institute data. In 2021, the first year after its incorporation, it handled none. While North Axis was established in Hong Kong in February 15, 2022, just 9 days before the Ukraine invasion, only buys crude oil from Rosneft PJSC. The state champion producer has used the startup firm for almost a third of its sales this year. Interesting, 9 days before the invasion. Quote, the whole thing just goes underground, said Adi Imthirovich, former head of oil at Gazprom Marketing and Trading, a UK entity ultimately owned by the Russian energy giant, and now a director at Surrey Clean Energy. We don't know who's doing what and how and what's going where. Tracking the Turba and the Simba, the 2 vessels involved in the clandestine cargo switching off the Greek coast in September, involved a global search stretching from Cameroon to Estonia, the Marshall Islands, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, the UK, and Ukraine. The IMO, part of the United Nations, hosts a database of ships including the companies that are registered as owning them and the flag under which they sail. Okay, this is halfway through the article. And I'm a little bit tired, so I'm not intervening much anymore. Where was I? Bus vessels sailed under the flag. Okay, bus vessels sailed under the flag of Cameroon, the only flag state, the national jurisdiction under which ships are registered for international trading, deemed to be, quote, very high risk by the Paris Memorandum of Understanding on the Port State Control, which monitors shipping safety standards. The Turba and Simba are among the least at least 9 vessels listed as being insured against risk, including oil spill and collision, by a firm called Continental P&I. All but one of the ships sailed under the flag of Cameroon, according to data compiled by Bloomberg from the IMO database, and have sailed to Russia port at some point in the last year. The tanker in question have a combined transportation capacity of almost 10 million barrels of oil. Continental has a phone number in Estonia and an address in the Marshall Islands, but there is no record of any named individual involved in the company or financial information about it. The person answering the phone in Estonia requested that inquiries be sent by email. The subsequent email requesting comment were ignored. Its website claims it has reinsurance from Lloyd's of London. A spokesperson at Lloyd's said it would not comment on individual policies or policyholders' plans with insurers in the market, but pointed out that Lloyd's itself is not a reinsurer. Yeah, well, that hurts. Several officials working in the shipping industry, in the shipping insurance industry, said they never heard of Continental P&I and that they were unable to find information about the firm, while 2 senior insurance executives highlighted a lack of published rules on Continental's website as a concern. The Turba receives ship classification services, documentation proving adherence to international maritime rule from a company called Mediterranean Shipping Register. It provides an address in Baker Street, London, the home of fictitious detective Sherlock Holmes, which it shares with more than 400 other firms. The database on the website of the Insurance Maritime Organization shows MSR as being based in Odessa, Ukraine. Bloomberg called the listed contact, who initially said he didn't think MSR was involved in providing classification services for the Turba, but then didn't answer further calls and messages. To provide classification services, a company needs the international recognition of flag state. MSR has that from Cameroon and the United Republic and Tanzania. Limited financial report lodged with the UK company register shows that MSR has assets of 100,000 British pounds in July 2022. Officials in Cameroon Ministry of Transport didn't respond to requests for comment. It was possible to contact the registered owners of it was not possible to contact the registered owners of either ships. Half a dozen international databases provided conflicted information about the ultimate owner. Scoot Sharton Corp and Lorne Maritime Limited are listed as the registered owners of the Turba and the Simba, respectively. The pair share a business address in the Seychelles. Not dodgy at all. A person answering the phone at ACM Management Limited, a corporate service provider at the Seychelles address, asked for inquiries to be emailed, but an email to its online address bounced back and followed-up calls were not answered. A Tokyo-based organization that oversees port inspection and keeps a database of its findings lists the Turba as being operated by a company called Arnavi Shipping Corp, based at an address 923 EW Pereira Mawada in Colombo, Sri Lanka. That doesn't exist. The building number on that street doesn't go up to that high. Sanctions are well-intentioned, said Ben Kyle, senior fellow at the Center for Strategic International Studies. But the fact is, they have ultimately led to a large fleet of aging tankers operating outside of the reach of Western regulators, presumably with subpar insurance. This has not gone unnoticed. Since October 12th, the US Treasury has sanctioned 8 oil tankers for breaching the price cap. 6 were owned by Russia's Sovcomflot, the state-backed oil tankers company. By the way, hello to the specialist of Sovcomflot, who is not listening right now, but is probably going to listen to this at some point. US authorities have also written to operators of about 100 ships asking for information about potential price cap violations. The EU is exploring the introduction of a notification system that would require its authorization to sell or export tankers and second-hand carriers. that could make it harder for member states such as Greece to sell tankers into the shadow fleet. The UK has also sanctioned Dubai-based oil traders over its opaque ownership structure. Yeah, Dubai is back. I was a bit surprised by the Ukraine thing. I mean, you would have think that, if you were trading with the Russians in Odessa, you would find yourself with swimming with the fishes, sleeping with the fishes at some point, but apparently not. The US Treasury has said that it now wants to push up the cost Russia faces to deliver its oil. We're going to look more carefully at the price cap. President Joe Biden, Energy Secretary Advisor Amos Hochstein, told Bloomberg on Tuesday. He added that the US Treasury and others were taking measures to ensure that Moscow's profit from the oil trade falls following an increase in the price of Russian crude. We're going to take action whenever we see the need to bring the price down to the cap level or below it, he said on the sideline of COP28 in Dubai. The ultimate question is whether the US and its allies really want to curtail Russian oil flows, something that would potentially drive up global fuel prices in an election year for Biden. If they don't, and that's the belief among many oil traders and analysts, then Moscow has workarounds it can employ. From its shadow fleet to encouraging Western services providers to turn a blind eye to potentially false accusations from traders about the price at which they buy oil. Policymakers always had dual goals: keep the market well supplied and drive down Russia's revenue per barrel, said Cahill at CSIS. It seems clear that the first priority is taking precedence. Targeted enforcement actions have increased in the past 6 weeks. But in the big picture, Russia has moved methods, crude, and product export out of easy reach of G7 sanctions. Sorry, that was a bit long and painful. So yeah, 2 hours is about as much as I can muster. So thank you to everyone who listened. Thank you for those who tried to listen but then couldn't be bothered. What else? I think Erland is trying to speak. Erland, is it working?
Yes, it's working now. Thank you, Ben. I don't want to hold you up. I understand that this was a marathon, and I just want to say thank you for this ASMR Twitter space with economic readings. It's been really, really nice to hear you again. And if I may, we got a question in the comments on YouTube. Do you have time for a very short question, Ben?
Oh yeah, of course, but at one condition and one condition only. You remind everyone that there's a Tochnyi talk weekly space this Sunday at 8 Paris time. If you do this, I will answer the question.
Okay, so Tochnyi does weekly live. It's streamed on YouTube and Twitter, where we try to go through the news and do some other topics that we select per week. It's not every week we manage to get a deep dive into a specific topic, but we try. We also
Ben,
do live streams now and then on
yeah.
YouTube.
Oh, and if you have a chance to listen to the one by John on the American budget, I think that 5 minutes in, I realized it was going to be too wonkish for me, and it takes some special effort to be too wonkish for me. I read about corruption in companies and the use of data for fun, and within 3 minutes, I was like, okay, this guy is going way, way beyond what one could have expected. And the worst part is that not only does he know everything about the US thing, the way, about the way the US are doing their thing, which is okay, understandable. Is American, the US is important. Maybe it's a bit parochial, but then you realize that he knows so much about the Netherlands, the Dutch army, and the German procurement system and whatnot. The kid is weird. Anyway, you mentioned comments?
Yes, there was a comment and a question. It's a question from a YouTube listener, and it's maybe a little bit unrelated to the last article at least, but it's what are the most significant economic data points that Russia has stopped publishing over the last 2 years?
Oh, that's a good point. The first thing is, I am not I'm not a trained economist about Russia, so I was not following a lot of data for Russia, so I don't see a big difference. I think probably the main two is details about their the labor market. There are some information about the labor market that they're not that they used to publish, and that they're not anymore. So it feels like they have an incredible shortage all over the board, but we cannot estimate to what extent they're misusing those resources, or that they're yes, unemployment overall may be low, but at the same time misemployment might be very high, and that's the sort of data that I think is not available anymore. That's the first point, and the other clear point is beyond all the question of the budgets and all those things are becoming more and more secret. But maybe the most important is the situation of banks. We don't know much about Russian banks anymore, and that's significant because Russian banks have never inspired a whole lot of trust and confidence. They for the best part of Putin's time in the Kremlin, what are the Russian banks doing was one of the main source of interest from the IMF and the World Bank when it came to Russia, and a lot of the information is not secret. So there are massive question marks relating to the capacity of Russia to face even a limited credit crunch. We don't know whether they can do it, and we don't know to what extent the government would be able to do it, because you might find yourself in a very, because it's a closed system, you might find yourself in a very circular situation where the government has to borrow from the bank to be able to spend money, but at the same time the banks have to take money from the government to be able to stay afloat, and at some point something might give. So it's or not, because we don't have the data, so we don't know. So the banks on the one hand, and what was the first one? Yeah, and the labor market on the other. I would say the of those I follow, the most important.
So,
Sorry, and beside the trade data, we don't have the trade data. The good guys at the Bank of Finland are able to reconstitute the trade data, but we don't have very detailed trade data anymore. So it makes following the change between 2021 and 2022 very difficult.
so for instance, when Russia was trying to be a part of the European or the world banking system, I guess they, at least to a certain degree, gave up their books so that it was possible to review their reserves and their loan degree. And is that all obscured now?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. They needed to have their books open because Russia. I don't know if you know the Italian banking system, but the Russian banking system looked like the Italian banking system 20 years ago. So every little village had their own local bank. Every company had their own bank attached to them. That you had literally thousands of banks, independent as well. But because they're banks, they are interconnected. So if even one of the 1,000 was collapsing, it might trigger a general collapse of everyone. So there was a big problem, big worry. And on top of that, there was the question of what is the relationship between company X and the bank that is attached to it? Is company X just plundering the bank, or is the bank ran in a perfectly logical manner and they're just once in a while investing in company X to help it go along? And these are the sort of things that the oligarchs were used to change. Because they consolidated a lot of the banks, and you basically went from thousands of banks to a few dozens, which is still a lot by modern standards, but which is a lot more manageable. And having their books open in 2013 and even 2017, people were like, okay, this is going in the right direction for Russia to become a normal country. And the war and the closing of the books has completely destroyed that normality. In a way, you can consider that the war against normality, and in the banking world, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very informative.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you a lot, Erland, for your technical wizardry and for your wonderful support.